we're going to be talking a bit about accelerating development and mostly about Filament, but just calling this Filament felt a little on the nose. So, accelerating development, we're going to talk through basically what is Filament, why is Filament, and how Filament can help you speed your development workflow up. Out of curiosity, how many people have used Filament in this room? Show of hands, handful of people. How many people have used Tall Stack? So, Tailwind, Alpine, Livewire, Laravel. Yeah, that's a lot of people. Cool. So, we're talking a lot about that tonight. So, buckle up. It's going to be fun. Welcome. Just a couple of things. If you came in a little late or you don't know, restrooms are straight across the hall, so please feel free to use them as needed. And if you go out the hall and take a left, there's some food there. Please also indulge in the food. Super excited to be here. Meet all y'all in person. Oops. I don't know where that went. Oh, Zoom. No. Go away. There we go. First, do want to do a couple quick thank yous. Aha! Oh, thank you to big thank you to Joe for putting this on. Super awesome. Round of applause for getting this hall pulled together. Big thank you. This is going to lag a lot. All right, we're going to have to kind of keep an eye on the screen. Big thank you to Zillow for just allowing us to be here. So, Rob, again, thank you so much for getting this all squared away. Super excited. A little more pertinent to the talk, thank you. Maintainers of these, the Tall Stack framework, or the Tall Stack technology is basically a framework, right? Tailwind, Alpine, Laravel, Livewire, and all the contributors, folks who make plugins, open source projects, and this stuff. I don't know that there are many sets of tools that have made development faster and more exciting for the Laravel community, so big thank you to everybody involved in all that. There you go, yeah. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank the Filament community as well. We have a ton of plugins, a ton of stars, and a ton of awesome people in the Discord, online, on GitHub, so if you're not there and you want to be, definitely hop in, come talk to me afterwards, we can chat about it, but thank everyone in the Filament community so much. It really has been a pleasure and an honor to work with all of y'all and build technologies with Filament. So I'm going to stop my screen share really quickly and see if I can get this to not lag as much. So give me 2 seconds to plug the code back in, which I think has changed. EWD SHJ. There we go. Let's see. Can you let me in? Thank you. Just want to make this a little nicer. And if we can't do it, then we're just going to move. We're going to keep going. All right. There we go. All right. So, still a little laggy. That's okay. All right. So the plan for tonight, we are going to talk about 3 things. First of all, what is Filament? It's going to be quick. A lot of people know about it, but we do want to run down, get a baseline for everybody. Second, why use Filament? Pretty self-explanatory. And then third, what's the build process of Filament? We're going to spend most of the time here and explain pretty much from the ground up how you would implement Filament on top of a Laravel application, Tall Stack or otherwise. So, we're going to start with what is Filament. So, simply put, Filament is a collection of full stack components that really exist to make development faster, to accelerate your Laravel development. So, Filament's built on the Tall Stack, so if you already use these Tall Stack technologies, you should feel right at home with these Filament components. So why do we use Filament? Right? If you already use the Tall Stack, if you've already got your own components, your own UI library, your own way of handling data, why would you use Filament? So, in my opinion, there's a lot of power underneath the Filament organization. There are a lot of, there are a lot of different packages that the Filament project offers. So we got panel builder, form builder, table builder, notifications, actions, info list builder, and widgets. We'll touch on a handful of them tonight, not all of them because there's a lot. One thing to note is that the panel builder package actually wraps all of the rest of these packages in an opinionated format. So you can think of it kind of along the lines of a Laravel Nova, except where Laravel Nova is really geared and tuned towards admin panels. Filament is geared and towards building just like generic panels, like customer-facing applications, admin-facing applications, all the sorts. Now, if you have a Tall Stack application or you're planning on building one, but you don't want to use the opinionated styles and setup of the actual Filament panel builder, you can grab any one or more of these other packages and push them together. So if you're like, you know what, I want an easy way to make forms in my app, I really need notifications, but I don't have tables, I don't have info lists, I don't need widgets, you can just grab the form builder and the notifications package and put them in your app and use them. We'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. If you want more information, we'll talk afterwards because it's a little in-depth, but we will touch on it just a little bit. A couple of different quotes that I pulled off the Filament Discord to why I use Filament. To a newbie, it's very easy and fast. To a veteran, it's very powerful. Filament is built so that people can jump right in and start using the tall stack. You definitely need some Livewire and some Alpine experience if you want to build out custom experiences. But Filament does provide a lot out of the box, including with the panel builder. But once you really have got your hands in Filament, you started using it, you started using the tall stack, you unlock a lot of different powers that you may not have thought you would have had with a full stack component library. Additionally, and this is one of my favorites, use Filament to streamline your application development process so you can focus on your business and let Filament handle the rest. I think we've all kind of been in the situation where, oh man, I got to build forms again. I got to build tables that, interact with Eloquent and pull data out of the database again. Oh man, we need a notification system. We're going to pull one off the shelf. We're going to build our own. It's probably a bad idea to build my own, but I'm going to do it anyways because I'm a developer and I think I could do it. Sometimes it's nice to have something in place that just lets you focus on the business logic that makes you money, gets you users, achieves the results that you want to achieve instead of bogging yourself down in, I got to make forms again. That's why I love Filament. That's my, not my quote, but I resonate with that quite heavily. So that's the baseline. We're all kind of caught up. We're on the same page. Universal sign for yes, universal sign for no. We're all more on the same page. Perfect. So now we're going to talk about the build process. And in order to talk about the build process, we need to meet Joe. This is Joe. Joe is a New York resident through and through. And his one true love in New York is pizza. Joe loves pizza so much, in fact, that his friends and family come to him for advice on where to eat pizza, what pizza to eat, how to eat pizza, because apparently in New York I've learned there is like a method to eat the pizza, and I did not know that method and was like embarrassing myself. So we have people like Joe to help us with that. And Joe knows this, so Joe's like, I bet I can monetize this. I bet I can put my pizza brand out into the world. So Joe says, I want to build a newsletter so I can increase the reach of my budding pizza review brand. So Joe's looking around at newsletter softwares. He's like, oh, this one's cool. It's good. It's got most of what I want, but it's not got everything. But he doesn't really find what he wants. It doesn't bother him, though, because Joe's a developer. Joe has a MacBook, and he's probably going to build his own solution from scratch anyways. He's not going to get one off the shelf. So what Joe decides to do is design an application, and that's really small even on these screens, so we're going to talk through it. So Joe's going to design his own newsletter application. And that's what we're going to be pseudo-building tonight. So what we've got here is we've got users, right? There's two types of users. There's admin users who write the publications and the articles, and there's subscriber users who, like you would subscribe to a newsletter, subscribe to the newsletter. We have a publication model, which is basically just newsletter, but I called it publications because I did. And one publication can have many articles, right? So when you subscribe to a publication, think of it like a podcast. If you don't do newsletters, every time an article gets published, the people who subscribe to that publication get the article. For sake of time, and for sake of that would be a lot to show, we're going to assume that part of the logic of pushing out to multiple users who want to get this email newsletter is already in place. We're using something like MailChimp or SES or one of the other millions of email services that we could possibly provide. We're going to cover, hopefully, in the next about 20 minutes, these topics. So if you're looking for a specific one, we're going to talk about filament resources, relation managers, view pages, navigation clusters, custom pages, and multiple panels if we get there. I'm going to start speeding up so we can get to all of them, but again, we can always chat afterwards if we want to talk some more about this. If you're ever interested, this app that we're about to build is hosted, I hope it's public at this point, repository on my GitHub. I probably should check that after this talk. So if you have your computer or your phone, you want to follow along, obviously feel free. If you want to check it out later on, I will publish these slides, and by I mean Joe will probably publish these slides, so you can take a look at them. So all the code we're going to talk about and more is contained in that repo. So when we first boot up an application that has Filament installed, we see this. It's our sign-in page. Pretty standard. All of our models are here, all of our controllers, policies, migrations, everything, and Filament is installed with Composer. We get here. I've seeded a user, admin@example.com, and once we log in, we land on the Filament dashboard. Again, not much going on here, although these are widgets, so if you're curious what the widgets package does, widgets. But there's nothing going on the sidebar here. All we have is our dashboard page. But we can change that. Filament ships all sorts of artisan make commands, right? Just like you would normally do with a Laravel, like let's make a model, let's make a migration, make a controller. We can make a Filament resource. This is one of my favorite commands because of this command right here, this flag right here, this generate flag. So without that, when you generate a Filament resource, say for a user, you'll get a user resource.php file. Pretty standard. It'll have two empty methods in it. We'll talk about this in a minute. However, If you generate and you've already migrated your database, Filament will attempt to go ahead and populate the form and the table of this resource with the columns that you already have in your database. So if you have dates, it'll give you a date time input in a date time column. If you have text inputs, it'll give you text fields in your database. It'll give you a text field, text columns, and the like. We're going to use generate, honestly, just in the interest of time, but I do love that command. So this is what gets generated. It's very small. I don't expect you to read all this. It's a lot of code. We're going to go through it little by little. Again, you'll be able to see the app if you look at the code later, but it does generate an entire user resource file. So let's look a little deeper into this. First thing it generates is a form method. Form method kind of does what it says on the tin. When you go to create or update, in this case a user, this is how we define what inputs you see. So we return a form object and we call the schema method and pass in this array, and we give it all the different inputs. So for example, since users have names, we want a text input that's required with a max length of 255 to be the name. We want to have a select option for picking what role. In our case, it's admin or subscriber. We're actually using this user role enum as the options. That's an option to do. And then we have a text input for the email, where it's going to be email validated, required, and a max length of 255, and then a date picker, which we probably don't actually need because it's an email verified at, but I didn't take the code out. All of this code comes from the form builder package. So that's important to remember. Remember, we're inside the idea of a panel, a Filament panel, but the Filament panel includes all of the rest of these packages. So what we're looking at here, this form method, if you were to just drop the form package into your TallStack app, this is still exactly how you would make a form. Same exact way. Which is nice, because as you use Filament across different types of applications, you're stuck with the same tools. You're not having to relearn things or have little nuances. There's a couple little nuances, as you know, there always is, but in general, this is what you're looking at. And this is the form we get. Name, select field, another text input, date input. There is a calendar here. I just didn't click on it when I captured the screenshot. So this is an edit user. The create form would look the same, except all the fields would be blank, unless there's a default, in which case, default value. In addition, and this is going to be a little smaller, and I apologize, I probably should have, did I split this up? No, I didn't. Okay. In addition, we also have a table method. This does the same sort of thing as the form method, except it's for tables, so for indexes, right? Lists of resources. Just like we had all the form fields laid out in the form method, we have all the different table columns we want Filament to use in the table method. They're all extensible and have all the different, with some searchable and sortable, we can toggle if it's hidden by default. All sorts of decorators on top of these columns. There's all sorts of different ones. I definitely encourage you to take a look at the docs to see it. But in the same way that the form method was part of the form builder package, the table method is part of the table builder package. So if you use tables in any of your other TallStack apps, this is how you do it. And this is the table you end up with from what we just saw there. So it's paginated by default. You can change the default number and all that jazz. We have a new user action at the top. We can edit all these users because in our policy, we have the ability to do that. If you didn't have the ability to do that in your policy, these would just disappear. Filament would just take them away. And you can have, and I didn't, again, do it, but if you check multiple boxes, you'll have bulk actions. Oops, I just touched the TV. Sorry, Zillow. We'll have bulk actions appear up here at the top. So quick detour, how do tables get their data? So by default, Filament's just going to grab all the results in your table and paginate them by 10, 20, 50, however many you say. However, if we chain, in addition to the columns method, if we chain on, there we go, this modify query using method, we can actually modify, the query that Filament is using to get these different results. So in our case, we only want, if this is in the publications resource, which we haven't been looking at, sorry for the context switch, if we only want to get the publications that we have written, author ID is our authenticated user's ID, we put this in, the table will only show our publications. Pretty neat, pretty easy. You can do whatever eloquent you want in there. Kept it simple for the slides, but you can really do whatever you want. So, going back to Joe. Joe is very happy. All the models are in the system. But now how do we view related data? Right? What if Joe wants to determine, okay, I'm looking at a user in the system. Which of my publications is that user subscribed to? We can use something called relation managers. And again, we have a make command, and we're going to pass this attach flag. It's a many-to-many relationship, so basically that just tells Filament, go ahead and add the attach command, the detach command. You can pass associate for a one-to-many, belongs to a relationship, or you can just leave it blank and do it yourself. Doesn't matter. It's just going to add one button for us. But what we're going to do is we're going to end up creating a relation manager that attaches. You'll notice I didn't pass a name here, right? So in the last one, or in the resources, make filament resource user, right? If you don't pass required parameters, we just default to Laravel prompts and we ask you, hey, what model do you want this resource to be? What do you want to call this relation manager? What value in the table should we key this by? So usually it's like title. So if you don't see those from here on out, it's because I'm just assuming we're using Laravel prompts and it just didn't fit really well in the slides. So when we generate a relation manager, we end up with a class that looks like this. And again, this is a little small, so I will just explain. But it should look pretty familiar to something we just did. We end up with a relation manager that has a form method and a table method. Because these relation managers include a little table that sits underneath your resource, kind of like Nova. If you're familiar with Nova, you can put relation managers underneath your, the information on a single model. And we, in Filament, with this form method, can create and edit and do all that stuff with forms, the records that are in that relation manager. So I'll show you in just a second. The only thing that's different is instead of being attached to a model, they're attached to a relationship. So in this case, it's a subscriptions relationship because we're going from users to publications, which is just called subscription. I didn't name it Laravel standards because I didn't at this point. So the next question you're probably asking is, why do we want to have to redefine all these fields, the forms and the tables? And if you weren't, now you are because I just said it. So by default, Filament doesn't assume that you want the same form fields and table columns to show up in your relationships that you do just when you're listing out all of your users or making a new publication to create form. You can certainly use PHP and just extract the fields you want to share out to a method or a class or literally whatever. But by default, we have you redeclare. Just to make sure that we're not accidentally leaking out data into a relationship that either doesn't matter or isn't secure to leak out. But again, you're well within your rights to do something like that. So here we're only showing the title column for the publications that are being subscribed to instead of like the rest of the data that comes along with the publication, like number of users, number of subscribers, things like that. Additionally, and I mentioned this very briefly, each table can have a header action. When we pass that attach flag, this is what happened. We added an attach action, which is a little button that just says attach, although we have changed the label to subscribe to publication. We're preloading all the records, so instead of getting records as we type into search, we're just getting the first 10 or however many, I think it's 10 by default. And we're adjusting the options query, so we're only getting those publications that belong to our user that we're the author of. Again, you can pass whatever eloquent you want in here, and Filament will run that query, or append it really, to the query for the table before it actually shows the data. And this is what it looks like. So you notice here's the user form that we already made, and underneath we have this subscriptions relation manager. Subscribe to publication, there's an attach button. Notice that instead of a delete, we have a detach, because we don't want to just delete publications willy-nilly from the users. We might want to unsubscribe them if they, call in like, this is bad, I don't like your newsletter anymore, get me off. Click that button. And the only thing showing up, like I said, is the title. Joe is happy. Joe is real happy. He is able to do pretty much every CRUD operation that he wants to within this newsletter app. He can create and manage publications, he can write new articles and send them, again, assuming the email stuff is set up correctly, and he can even manage his subscribers. So Joe is pleased here. But now he has a new problem. How can he view the contents of these articles without having to send himself a test email? Well, view pages. So we've covered, I kind of lied, 3 out of the 4 CRUD letters, but we don't really have a read, right? We can go in and edit the user and see the data like that, but I could also accidentally change it and save it, and it's kind of a pain. But Filament gives us the ability to have view pages. Again, very similar to something like Nova. There we go. Again, there's a make command for making a page, and we're specifically going to make a view record for the article resource, because we're going to view the rich text article. And then it will look like this. So what you end up with by default is your form that we created. This is for the article. This is a rich text field. But all the fields are disabled. You can't change them. That's nice. It's fine. It works. But we can take it a step further with something called info list. So this leads into our info list package. It's just a way to make read-only data that doesn't look like a form field. It's just easier to show you. But all you have to do is in the resource underneath your forms or your form and your table method, you make an info list method. Again, if you were using these as separate packages, you have to obviously require the package first, but you can just use this info list method, put in all the different entries you want. Again, just like inputs, just like columns, there's tons of them, so take your pick, look at the documentation. And we end up with something a little bit like this. So what we have is all of the form fields that we had previously, but they don't look like form fields, they look a little nicer. Obviously, you can use CSS to style these however you want. And then we have a rich text field. That's no longer rich text. We're actually just displaying the HTML. We're using Tailwind's Pros class here for simplicity. It's just displayed right here. So what you're seeing here is the HTML that's going to be rendered out by that rich text field, which just happens to be saving HTML in the database. Joe is flying now. I didn't do a picture of that for you. You're welcome. He is like moving, right? We're getting stuff done, and now we're going to add some more features. So the next thing he wants to do is try to improve the navigation experience in this app. This was a little bit of a leading transition, but here we are. We're going to make something called a cluster. So this one's one of the more confusing names, in my opinion. But what this allows us to do is group related resources and pages together in Filament and display them in like a sub-nav. Again, we'll see in a second. It'll make much more sense. There's a make command for it. Of course there is. And all you have to do to add a page or a resource to a cluster is throw this string. We're calling the cluster publications, by the way. I recognize it's kind of confusing because there's a resource called that, but go with me here. There's a cluster called publications, which we just created. All you have to do is at the top of any of your files, or really wherever in your files, your pages or your resources, throw this cluster name, and you'll end up with something that looks like this. So in this case, on the article resource and the publication resource, we added the cluster. So you see the cluster, which is publications, and again, I know it's a little confusing, but now we have this subnav. The breadcrumbs will adjust, because now we are in the publications cluster, looking at the articles, looking at a list of articles, and the route will adjust too. So now you'll have a nested route. So it'll be something like yourcoolapp.com/admin/publications/articles. It's a super easy way to like bundle up all your different resources. But you don't have to bundle all of them. You'll see that the dashboard page and the user's resource is still outside this cluster. So you're free to put whatever you want in whatever cluster. Now Joe is organized. He's going. We're moving. This app is good. I mean, I think so, but I'm biased. So now he can see all the publications, all his articles, but he wants to see all of the users that are subscribed to all of his publications at once. So we're going to move into custom pages. This is where knowledge of Livewire and Alpine become super important, because pages in Filament are just Livewire components. Like, you just write Livewire code and it just shows up, which is pretty cool. I like that. It's kind of fun. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a custom page that will show all the subscribers that are subscribed to all of Joe's publications. Again, make Filament page. If you leave it blank, it's a custom page. So before we used a view, like the view record flag, to say it's going to be a view page very specifically. Here we're leaving it blank. Just give me a custom page called My Subscribers. And, oh boy, this really was smaller than I thought. So when you generate the page, you don't have all of this stuff, which is the cluster and the table method. What we have done here is we've implemented has table. So this is, I alluded to earlier, we're going to talk a little about how like you can add these custom packages in your Livewire components. If you wanted to add a table to a Livewire component, this is how you do it. You implement has table, you add the table method, you do exactly what we did before in all the other table methods, you define your columns. We're even giving it a specific query, basically again just to get all the subscribers for all the different publications. And because it's a custom page, you do have to update the blade with this line, this table. And Filament will generate the table for you. Obviously, you can publish the views, change how the table looks. But in our case, we're using the default. You just add this table, and Filament will spit the table out on the custom page, and it will look like this. So we don't have any actions. We didn't add any. We are paginated still. We added it to the cluster. This is a custom page, so we're within the publications cluster. And now we have a whole table full of data we got custom out of the database. Again, I know it just looks like a table page. We're probably going to have a better example with like a Livewire counter or something, but I feel like counters are a little played out and tables are fun. So at this point, Joe is on fire. He's moving. We're going. But he's got one more goal, and I promise this is where I'm going to wrap it up and be very quick about it. Joe wants a place where his subscribers can log into his app and see the articles for the publications they have subscribed to. And this is one of my favorite features about Filament. You're not limited to a single panel. So up until this point, we've been working with a panel called Admin because I decided I wanted a panel called Admin. But now I want to add a panel called Subscribers. You guessed it. There's another make command for it. Make panel, type in the name of the panel you want. In our case, we're going to call it Subscribers. And it puts a panel provider, a subscriber panel provider, in your Laravel app. So every panel is configured with a provider. Think of it like a service provider in your Laravel application. When you have multiple panels, multiple service providers. Each service provider can have different customization options. So you can have different users log in different panels, which is what's happening in our case. The one customization I made in the demo is that the subscriber panel is blue instead of yellow. You'll see that. And you can have different resources, clusters, and pages assigned to each of those panels. So you can have a hard tenancy wall if you only want one set of resources in one panel and one set of resources in another. So as a reminder, this is what our admin panel currently looks like. This is where we're at. And this is what our new subscriber panel looks like. Similar, but subtly different. Notice the blue. I know there's not very much blue, but there is a little bit of blue and there's no yellow. Also notice there's no cluster here. We lost our cluster because I only put the cluster on the admin panel. Because I don't want that cluster on the subscriber panel. I just want articles and publications. And you'll notice on the articles page, no edit button because subscribers don't have a permission to edit articles. They can view them though. And now Joe is living in the future. He is a future developer. So we'll recap. I know it was a blazing fast talk through Filament. We talked about Filament resources, relation managers, view pages, navigation clusters, custom pages, and multiple panels. There is so much more to Filament. We literally didn't even hit all the packages. Like we hit half of the packages that Filament offers. Some were kind of there in the background we didn't talk about. I encourage you. The whole point of this talk was to spark a little bit of interest. See if Filament fits in your workflow. If it does, try it out. If it doesn't, I would say try it out, but don't feel like you have to. I'm not up here forcing you. But I want to spark a little something. Does Filament accelerate your development workflow? Does it give you the tools you need to build an application faster, better, skip the stuff you don't need or don't want, and build the stuff that actually matters for your business? If you want to find out more, obviously the website and the docs are fantastic. Always working on the docs. Still, a little rough with the searching. Algolia is hard, but we're getting it to work. There's also 2 Laracast courses. This one from Kevin McKee, so underrated, so good. Kevin is such a good instructor. It's kind of ridiculous. Go watch this course. If you have Laracast, actually it might be a free one. I'm not even sure. Watch this course. And if you want to dive deeper, you want to build your own custom form components, table components, info list components, check out the course by Dan Heron. He did a whole Laracast course on just that, and it's phenomenal. You can get me on my website, on Twitter. Joe will share out the slides. But yeah, thank y'all for listening to me talk about Filament. If you have any questions, obviously I'll be around afterwards, but this is a ton of fun. I appreciate it.